The communications officer on the UNSS Meridian turned pale as the emergency broadcast filled her screen. Ambassador Sarah Chen rushed to the bridge, her coffee forgotten on her desk. What she saw made her blood run cold. Valora Prime was dying. The beautiful crystalline cities that covered the planet's surface were shattering under heavy weapons fire from orbit. The Valorans had built their civilization from living crystal that grew naturally on their world. These structures had stood for over 10,000 years, reflecting the light of their twin suns in brilliant rainbows. Now they exploded into dust and fragments as the Galactic Council's warships fired again and again. Sarah had visited Valora Prime 3 times. She remembered walking through the Crystal Gardens with First Ambassador Telmara, discussing Earth's application to join galactic society. The Valorans had been the only species to speak in humanity's favor. Every other member of the Council had voted against Earth's admission. Humans are too violent, the Arxian representative had declared. They still fight wars among themselves. They have no place in civilized space. Telmara had stood up in the Great Council chamber. Her crystalline body had glowed with inner light as she spoke. Every species was violent once. The humans have learned to control their nature. They deserve a chance to prove themselves. I cast my vote for their admission. The Council had been furious. The Arxians especially, but Telmara's vote carried ancient weight. The Valorans were the oldest species in known space. They had been mediating disputes and keeping peace for millennia, before most Council species had even discovered fire. Her vote could not be ignored. Earth had been admitted to the Galactic Council by a single vote. That was 2 years ago. Now Sarah watched as the Council repaid the Valorans for their kindness. How many ships? She asked quietly. The tactical officer checked his screens. 43 Council warships, Ambassador. They're firing on civilian targets. No military installations, just cities. Sarah's hands gripped the edge of the command console. Are they responding to any hails? No, ma'am. But we're picking up a broadcast from the Council flagship. It's a declaration. The main screen changed. High Arbiter Zexthar appeared, his reptilian features twisted in what might have been satisfaction. The Arxian wore his full ceremonial robes, as if this was an official state function rather than mass murder. By order of the Galactic Council, Zexthar announced, the Valoran species has been found guilty of harboring weapons of mass destruction in violation of galactic law. Their refusal to submit to inspection left us no choice but to enforce compliance. This action is legal and justified under Council authority. Sarah felt sick. It was a complete lie. The Valorans were pacifists. They had no weapons beyond basic planetary defense systems. This wasn't enforcement. This was genocide. Ambassador, we're receiving direct messages from the surface, the communications officer said, her voice shaking. Thousands of them. They're begging for help. Sarah closed her eyes. The Meridian was a diplomatic vessel. It carried no weapons. They had a crew of 47. Even if they had been a warship, what could one ship do against 43? Record everything, Sarah ordered. Every transmission, every sensor reading, every second of video. Earth needs to see this. For 6 hours, the crew of the Meridian watched helplessly. The Council warships were methodical and thorough. They targeted the crystal cities one by one, starting with the largest population centers. The Valorans had no military fleet. They had relied on their status as mediators and peacekeepers to protect them. That trust had been betrayed. Sarah forced herself to watch. She owed the Valorans that much. She owed Telmara that much. A private message came through on Sarah's personal channel. She recognized the encryption pattern. It was from Telmara herself. The image was shaky. Telmara was in some kind of shelter deep underground. Behind her, Sarah could see hundreds of Valoran civilians huddled together. Many of them were children, their crystalline bodies not yet fully developed. Sarah, Telmara said softly, my friend, you must not blame yourselves for this. We knew the risk when we spoke for humanity. We believed it was right. We still believe it was right. An explosion shook the shelter. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Telmara continued speaking as if nothing had happened. The Council fears what they cannot control. They feared humanity's potential. They fear that younger species might challenge the old order. Our support of Earth gave them the excuse they needed to remove us. Another explosion, closer this time. Some of the Valorans in the background were crying. Others simply held each other. Tell your people something for me, Telmara said. Tell them that they were worth it. Tell them that the galaxy needs species who believe in justice more than power. Tell them that we died proud to have called humans our friends. The transmission cut off. Sarah tried to re-establish contact, but there was nothing. The shelter's signature had disappeared from their sensors. Telmara was gone. Sarah sat in her command chair for a long time. Around her, the bridge crew worked in silence. They all knew what they had witnessed. Finally, she stood up. Send everything we've recorded to Earth. Quantum burst transmission, maximum priority. Make sure it reaches the Security Council directly. Already done, Ambassador, the communications officer replied. We've been sending continuous updates for the last 5 hours. Good. Sarah looked at the main screen one more time. Valora Prime was barely visible through the clouds of debris that now surrounded it. Take us out of the system. Plot a course for Earth, maximum speed. Ma'am, that will take us through Council space. If they decide to stop us, they won't, Sarah said coldly. We're witnesses to what happened here. If they kill us too, they know what it will mean. Even the Council isn't ready for war with humanity. Not yet. She was wrong about that, but she didn't know it at the time. As the Meridian began its journey back to Earth, the Council fleet finished its work. The orbital bombardment continued for another 2 hours until nothing remained of Valoran civilization but rubble and ash. 4,300,000,000 Valorans had lived on their homeworld. By the time the Council fleet withdrew, fewer than 50,000 remained alive. Most of those survivors were off-world at the time of the attack. A few thousand had managed to escape in small civilian ships. They scattered across the galaxy, refugees with nowhere to go. Many of them turned toward Earth, the one species that had been friendly to the Valorans. The Council made no attempt to stop them. Zexthar even issued a statement declaring that the Council bore no ill will toward individual Valorans. They had simply been forced to remove a rogue government that threatened galactic security. The Arxian High Arbiter returned to the Council homeworld confident that he had sent a clear message. The old order would be maintained. Species that challenged Council authority would be crushed, and humanity, having seen what happened to their only allies, would surely fall in line. 3 days after the attack, a message arrived at Earth. It was from the Council itself, addressed to the United Nations Security Council. The message was brief and clear. The Galactic Council acknowledges that the Valoran incident may cause concern among newer member species. We want to assure humanity that the enforcement action was legal and necessary. We expect Earth's representatives to accept the Council's judgment in this matter. Any attempt to interfere or seek revenge would be viewed as an act of war against the entire Council. We trust that humanity will make the rational choice. The message ended with casualty figures from the attack, as if these were simple statistics rather than billions of lives. At the bottom was a single line that made the threat perfectly clear. The Council's combined military forces number over 10,000 warships. We hope Earth will keep this in mind when formulating its response. The emergency session of the United Nations Security Council began 30 minutes after the Meridian's recordings reached Earth. The member nations watched the footage in complete silence. When the last image faded, showing Telemara's final message, nobody spoke for a full minute. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo broke the silence. We've received the Council's message. They expect us to accept what happened. They're threatening war if we don't. Then we have no choice, the Chinese representative said quietly. We cannot fight the entire Galactic Council. We've been in space for barely a century. They have thousands of years of experience and 10,000 warships. The mathematics are simple. The Valorans died because of us, the American representative countered. They voted for our admission knowing the risk. We can't just abandon them. The Valorans are already gone, the Russian representative said harshly. Nothing we do will bring them back. Starting a war we cannot win won't honor their memory. It will just add human corpses to the pile. The debate continued for hours. Military commanders presented their analysis. Admiral Marcus Kane, commander of Earth's Third Fleet, stood before the Council with his report. Our combined forces total 847 warships, Kane began. This includes everything from carriers to destroyers. We've run simulations against Council fleet compositions. In a direct engagement, we would be outnumbered roughly 12-1. He paused, letting that sink in. Our technology is comparable in some areas, inferior in others. Council shields are more efficient. Their faster-than-light drives are more reliable. They have weapons we're still trying to understand. In a conventional war, we would lose within weeks, maybe days. So you're recommending we accept the Council's terms? Okonkwo asked. Kane was quiet for a moment. I'm giving you the facts, Madam Secretary General. What you do with them is a political decision, not a military one. But I will say this, if you give the order, my people will fight. We'll fight knowing the odds. We'll fight knowing we might lose, because some things matter more than survival. The debate resumed. Arguments flew back and forth. Some representatives argued for caution and survival. Others demanded justice regardless of cost. The voting began. France voted for action. Britain voted for caution. India voted for action. Brazil voted for caution. The vote split evenly down the middle. Finally, it came to the Secretary General herself to break the tie. Amara Okonkwo looked at the footage of Valora Prime one more time. She thought about Telmara's last words. She thought about what humanity stood for, what they claimed to believe in. I vote for action, she said quietly. We don't abandon our friends. Not for convenience, not for safety, not even for survival. If we let this stand, if we accept this massacre without response, then we're not the species the Valorans believed we were. We become exactly what the Council accused us of being, violent opportunists with no real principles. She looked around the chamber. Humanity has spent centuries learning to be better than our worst instincts. We've built a civilization based on the idea that might doesn't make right, that the strong have a duty to protect the weak. If we abandon that now because it's dangerous to defend it, then what was the point of any of it? The decision was made. Earth would respond to the Valoran massacre. The question now was how. Admiral Kane returned to his headquarters and immediately began issuing orders. Every Earth fleet received the same message. Converge on Rally Point Theta 7 maximum speed. 7 full fleets began moving toward a point in space 3 systems away from Valora Prime. The shipyards went into emergency production mode. Factories that had been building civilian vessels switched to military production. Workers volunteered for triple shifts. Resources were diverted from every non-essential program. Kane met with his senior officers in the war room. The holographic display showed Earth's forces in blue and known Council positions in red. There was a lot more red than blue. They'll be expecting us to respond emotionally, Kane said. They think we're predictable. Young species, driven by feelings instead of logic. We're going to use that. His chief of staff, Captain Jennifer Park, nodded. The Council's intelligence has been monitoring our military for 2 years. They think they know our capabilities. They don't know about the black projects. How many do we have ready? Kane asked. Project Longshot is operational. 300 rail cannon artillery platforms, each capable of accelerating projectiles to .3 light speed. Project Swarm has produced 15 million autonomous drones. Project Ghostwall is ready to deploy. Kane allowed himself a thin smile. The Council thinks we've been sitting idle for 2 years. They have no idea we've been preparing. For what? One of the younger officers asked. We weren't expecting war with the Council. No, Kane agreed. But we were expecting war with someone eventually. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. When we finally stopped, we didn't forget how. We just pointed that expertise outward instead, just in case. The fleet assembly took 6 days. Ships arrived from Earth, Mars, the Jupiter stations, even the distant colony at Tau Ceti. By the time the last vessel reached Rally Point Theta 7, Kane commanded the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. 847 warships, 93,000 personnel. Everything Earth had. Refugee ships also arrived at the rally point. Valoran survivors who had escaped the massacre heard about Earth's mobilization. They came in small civilian vessels, begging humanity not to throw their lives away for revenge. One of them, a Valoran named Kiranel who had been studying on Earth when the attack happened, managed to get a message through to Kane directly. Admiral, please, she transmitted. We appreciate what you want to do. But the Valorans are gone. Don't let humanity die too. Telmara wouldn't want this, Kane replied personally. With respect, Kiranel, this isn't about what Telmara would want. This is about what's right. The Council believes they can murder billions and face no consequences. We're going to teach them otherwise. You'll lose, Kiranel said. The numbers aren't everything, Kane interrupted gently. The Council has more ships, but we have something they don't. We have a reason to fight that goes beyond orders and politics. Every human in this fleet volunteered. Every single one. They chose to be here knowing they might die. That's worth more than you think. Ambassador Sarah Chen joined the fleet as well. The Meridian was still unarmed, but she insisted on being present. I watched them die, she told Kane. I'm going to watch them be avenged. The fleet made its final preparations. Engineers checked every system twice. Weapons crews ran through drill after drill. Marines practiced boarding procedures, though nobody expected to get close enough to board anything. Kane stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UNSS Retribution, and looked at the tactical display. His entire fleet was ready. The course to Valora Prime was plotted. The crew waited for his order. He thought about Telmara. He thought about the 4 billion Valorans who had died for the crime of defending humanity. He thought about the message the Council had sent threatening Earth into submission. All ships, Kane said calmly. This is Admiral Kane. In a few hours we're going to jump to Valora Prime. The Council will be waiting for us. They think they know how this will end. They think we're young and stupid and emotional. They think we'll charge in blindly and die gloriously. They're right about one thing. We are emotional. We're angry. We're angry that our friends were murdered. We're angry that the Council thinks they can get away with it. But we're not stupid. And we're not suicidal. He paused. Every human on these ships knows the odds. You all volunteered anyway. You volunteered because you understand that some things matter more than survival. Justice matters. Loyalty matters. Making sure that bastards don't get to commit genocide without consequences matters. So let's go give the Council a lesson in why you should never underestimate humanity. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed. 847 human warships headed toward Valora Prime. Toward what the Council expected to be Earth's funeral. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Valora system. What they saw made even Admiral Kane pause. 3,000 warships waited for them. The Council had assembled an armada. Ships from dozens of species filled the space around Valora Prime's corpse. Arxian battlecruisers formed the core of the formation, their weapons already charged and ready. Smaller vessels from client species surrounded them in defensive rings. On the Retribution's bridge, the tactical officer swallowed hard. Admiral, that's more than 3 times what our intelligence predicted. They're not taking any chances. Kane studied the display calmly. They want to make an example of us just like they did the Valorans. Show every other species what happens when you defy the Council. A transmission came through from the Council flagship. High Arbiter Zexthar appeared on screen, his reptilian features arranged in what might have been amusement. Admiral Kane, Zexthar said. How predictable. We knew you humans would let your emotions override your judgment. You've brought your entire fleet to die here. How touching. Kane didn't respond immediately. He gestured to his communications officer to delay the reply while he issued quiet orders to his ships. Finally, he turned back to the screen. High Arbiter, you murdered 4 billion innocent people. Did you really think we wouldn't respond? We enforce galactic law, Zexthar replied. The Valorans refused to comply with a Council inspection. They paid the price for their defiance, just as you are about to pay the price for yours. You're offering us a chance to retreat? Kane asked. Zexthar made a sound that might have been laughter. No. You came here to die for your precious friends. We're going to grant your wish, but I will make you an offer. Surrender now and we'll make it quick. Your crews will be executed humanely. Refuse and we'll drag this out. We'll cripple your ships and let your people suffocate slowly in the wreckage. The choice is yours. Kane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was cold and hard. High Arbiter, you killed the wrong species. He cut the transmission and turned to his crew. All ships execute Formation Delta. Launch all drones. Activate Ghostwall on my mark. The Council fleet moved forward, confident and unhurried. 3,000 ships against 800. The outcome seemed obvious. Council gunners locked their weapons on the human vessels, waiting for the order to fire. Zexthar gave that order with a satisfied hiss. Destroy them all. Energy weapons lanced out from 3,000 Council ships. The barrage lit up space like a second sun. More firepower than had been used to destroy Valora Prime focused on the human fleet. The humans' shields held. On the Retribution's bridge, alarms blared, but the ship remained intact. All across the fleet, the same thing happened. Council weapons struck Earth's shields and were absorbed or deflected. Shield strength at 70% and holding, the defense officer reported. Their weapons are exactly what we expected. The upgrades are working. Kane allowed himself a small smile. They tested their weapons against our older shield designs. They don't know we've upgraded. Launch Phase 2. From the human carriers, millions of small objects began pouring out. They looked like simple drones, tiny compared to the massive warships around them. The Council tactical officers noted them but weren't concerned. Small drones couldn't damage capital ships. The drones swarmed toward the Council fleet like insects. Council point defense systems activated, destroying thousands of them. But there were millions more. They reached the Council ships and attached themselves to hulls, sensor arrays, and weapon ports. "What are these things doing?" a Council captain demanded. "They're not exploding. They're not doing anything." Then they activated. Every drone was a specialized jammer. Some disrupted sensors. Others blocked communications. Still others created false targeting data. Within seconds, the Council fleet lost coordination. Ships couldn't talk to each other. Sensors showed phantom targets or nothing at all. Weapon systems locked onto empty space. "Now," Kane ordered. "All ships fire at will." The human fleet had been holding perfectly still, making no evasive maneuvers. The Council had thought this meant they were paralyzed with fear. They were wrong. The human ships had been calculating firing solutions. The first railgun round crossed the distance between fleets in 3 seconds. It was a solid tungsten rod accelerated to 30% of light speed. When it hit the Council flagship's shields, those shields didn't just fail. They shattered. The projectile punched through the ship's hull, through its reactor and out the other side. The Council flagship broke in half. More railgun rounds followed. Hundreds of them. The Council's energy shields were designed to absorb and redirect energy weapons fire. They had been the standard defense for thousands of years. Nobody in the Council had seriously used kinetic weapons in centuries. The humans used nothing but kinetic weapons. Tungsten rods moving at relativistic speeds hit Council ships like hammers striking eggs. Shields that could laugh off energy weapons crumpled instantly. Ships exploded. Debris scattered across space. "Return fire," Zexthar screamed from an auxiliary command center. "Kill them!" But the Council ships couldn't target effectively. The human drones were feeding them false data. When Council ships fired, their weapons missed by kilometers, and the few shots that came close were absorbed by human shields. The humans had spent 2 years studying Council weapons technology. They knew exactly what to expect and had designed their defenses accordingly. The Council had spent the same time assuming humans would use conventional tactics. They were completely unprepared for what Kane's fleet was doing. "Launch Phase 3, Kane ordered. Nuclear-pumped laser arrays activated across the human fleet. These were old technology by galactic standards, crude and inefficient. The Council had dismissed them as primitive when they reviewed Earth's military capabilities. But the lasers worked. And the Council ship's shields, already disrupted by the drones and staggered by kinetic impacts, couldn't stop them all. Coherent beams of concentrated light carved through Council vessels. Power systems exploded. Life support failed. Ships that had survived for thousands of years died in seconds. The Council formation broke. Ships tried to retreat, but they found their escape vectors blocked. During the opening moments of the battle, while the Council had been focused on the human fleet, human stealth ships had moved into position. These vessels had been completely invisible to Council sensors. Now they dropped their stealth fields and began launching mines. Council ships ran into the mines and exploded. Others tried to maneuver around them and collided with each other. Their sensors still disrupted by the drones. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 47 Council vessels," the communications officer reported. "Accept their surrenders," Kane said. "Transmit coordinates for them to move to. Any ship that doesn't comply within 60 seconds gets destroyed." 32 ships complied. 15 tried to run. None of them made it. The battle lasted 2 hours. When it ended, over 500 Council ships had been destroyed. Another 300 were severely damaged. Only a handful escaped intact. Human casualties were light by comparison. 89 ships had been destroyed, mostly in the opening barrage before the shields stabilized. 34,000 humans were dead. It was a tragedy. But against 3,000 enemy vessels, the exchange rate was unbelievable. Zexthar survived, though his flagship was destroyed. He transmitted from an escape pod, his voice filled with disbelief. "This is impossible. You're primitives. You've been in space for barely a century. How did you do this?" Kane's response was broadcast across the entire system. "You made assumptions, High Arbiter. You assumed we were weak because we're young. You assumed we were predictable because we're emotional. You assumed we'd fight like you do because that's all you know. But humans have been fighting wars since before we discovered fire. We've spent thousands of years learning to kill each other efficiently. When we finally stopped fighting ourselves, we didn't forget those lessons. We just saved them for someone who deserved them. He paused. You wanted to teach the galaxy a lesson about defying the Council. Congratulations, you succeeded. But the lesson is different than you planned. The lesson is this: don't pick fights with species that befriend their enemies and avenge their friends. Because if you hurt the people we care about, we will make you regret it. Kane switched to a fleet-wide channel. All ships begin recovery operations. Pull survivors from the debris, ours and theirs. Set up medical facilities for prisoners. Repair damaged vessels. And someone get me a communication line to the Council homeworld. We need to discuss terms. Admiral Kane sat in his command chair and looked at the tactical display. The space around Valoran Prime was filled with debris from Council ships. Human vessels moved through the wreckage, rescuing survivors and securing prisoners. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had won. But this wasn't over. The Council had 10,000 ships. They destroyed 500 and damaged 300 more. That left a lot of enemies still out there. Sir, Captain Park said quietly, the Council is going to respond to this. They can't let it stand. I know, Kane replied, but they're going to think very carefully before they do. We just showed them that humans are dangerous, more dangerous than they imagined. With luck, that will make them cautious. The news of the Battle of Valoran Prime spread across the galaxy within hours. Species that had served the Council for thousands of years watched the footage in shock. The humans, those primitive newcomers who had barely entered space, had destroyed a Council armada. The Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from 60 species gathered in the Great Chamber on the Council homeworld. The mood was chaos. We must respond immediately, the Arxian military commander demanded. Deploy the full fleet, crush Earth before they can recover, and risk another defeat? The Thelan representative shot back. Did you see the same battle reports I did? The humans destroyed 500 ships and lost less than 90. Those are not acceptable losses. They caught us by surprise, Zexthar argued. He had been rescued from his escape pod and brought back to the homeworld. Now we know their capabilities. We can adapt, can we? An old Morvian counselor asked. We've been fighting the same way for 10,000 years. Energy weapons, shield technology, standard fleet formations. The humans showed us something we forgot. There are other ways to fight. Ways we don't understand anymore. The debate continued for days. Meanwhile, Admiral Kane wasn't waiting for the Council to make up their minds. Human fleets began moving throughout Council space. They didn't attack civilian targets. They didn't bombard planets. But every Council military installation within 5 systems of Valoran Prime suddenly found human warships in orbit. Kane broadcast a simple message to each installation. Evacuate immediately. You have 6 hours. Most complied. A few tried to fight. Those installations were reduced to rubble by railgun fire. The Council watched helplessly as humans dismantled their military infrastructure in an entire sector. Every weapons depot, every shipyard, every military base. Gone. The humans were methodical and unstoppable. They're carving out a buffer zone, a Council military analyst reported, creating a region of space where we have no military presence. If we want to attack Earth, we'll have to cross 5 systems with no support structure. More troubling were the reports of stealth ships. The Council had believed they had a complete inventory of human military vessels. Now ships appeared that had never been recorded. Vessels that could hide from every known sensor system. These stealth ships were discovered in orbit around Council member worlds, just sitting there, watching. How long have they been there? The Thelan representative demanded. How long have humans been spying on us? Nobody had an answer. The realization was terrifying. If humans could hide ships anywhere, then the Council had no security. No secrets, no safe places. Ambassador Sarah Chen arrived at the Council homeworld on the Meridian. She was alone, unarmed, and requesting an audience with the full Council. The audacity of it stunned the Council representatives. She wants to dictate terms? Zexthar hissed. After everything they've done? After everything we did, the Morvian counselor corrected. We started this war when we destroyed Valoran Prime. The humans are finishing it. The Council agreed to meet with Sarah. She entered the Great Chamber alone. walking calmly to the central platform where speakers addressed the assembly. Around her, representatives from 60 species watched with a mixture of fear, anger, and curiosity. Sarah didn't waste time with diplomatic niceties. The Galactic Council murdered 4 billion Valorans. You did it to send a message. You did it because they supported humanity. And you wanted to show what happens to species that defy you. Well, the humans received your message. Now let me deliver ours. She activated a holographic display. It showed the current tactical situation. Human fleets controlled 5 systems. Council military forces had been pushed back. And most importantly, the display showed estimated positions of human stealth vessels. There were dozens of them, scattered throughout Council space. Those are just the ones we're telling you about, Sarah said calmly. We have more. A lot more. And they're currently in orbit around every Council member world. Each one carries enough nuclear weapons to sterilize a planet. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted. Some demanded she be arrested. Others called for immediate military action. Sarah waited for the noise to die down. We don't want to use them. Humanity doesn't want to destroy civilian populations. We're not like you. But those weapons are there. And they'll stay there until we reach an agreement. What kind of agreement? The Morvian counselor asked quietly. First, the Galactic Council will be dissolved, Sarah said. Not destroyed, dissolved. It will be reformed as a true democratic federation where every species has equal representation and equal voice. No more dominant powers. No more enforcement actions against civilian populations. Impossible, Zexthar declared. The Council has maintained order for 10,000 years. You want to destroy that for your primitive ideas of democracy? Second, Sarah continued, ignoring him, everyone involved in ordering the Valoran genocide will be turned over to stand trial. That includes you, High Arbiter Zexthar. War crimes tribunals will be held on neutral ground. The verdicts will be enforced. Third, the surviving Valorans will be given territory to rebuild. Former Council military space will be transferred to Valoran control. They'll be given resources and protection to re-establish their civilization. She looked around the chamber. These terms are not negotiable. You have 72 hours to accept them. If you refuse or if you attack Earth, those stealth ships will activate their weapons. Every Council homeworld will burn. All of them, simultaneously. There won't be a negotiation. There won't be a warning. We'll just do it. You're bluffing, Zexthar said. Humans wouldn't commit genocide. You're too weak, too moral. Sarah turned to look at him directly. You murdered our friends. You threatened to do the same to us. And you clearly didn't learn the first lesson, so let me make it simple. Humanity can be peaceful. We prefer peace. We'll almost always choose peace. But if you mistake our preference for peace as an inability to wage war, you're making a fatal error. We know how to be monsters, High Arbiter. We spent thousands of years perfecting it. We just choose not to be. But if you force our hand, if you make us choose between our principles and our survival, we'll choose survival and live with the guilt later. She deactivated the hologram. 72 hours. Decide whether the Council's pride is worth more than your world's. Sarah left the chamber in silence. Behind her, the Council representatives sat in stunned disbelief. Over the next 3 days, humanity demonstrated what Sarah's threat meant. They didn't attack any worlds. Instead, they showed what they could do. A remote asteroid in an uninhabited system was targeted by a single human stealth ship. The Council sent observers to watch. The asteroid was roughly the same size as a medium planet. The stealth ship fired a single weapon. The asteroid ceased to exist, not destroyed. Not broken apart. It simply stopped existing. The weapon was a focused antimatter bomb, something the Council had banned centuries ago as too dangerous to use. Humans had apparently not gotten that message. The demonstration was clear. Earth could do this to any planet, any time, and the Council would never see it coming. Panic spread through Council space. Some species began quietly contacting Earth directly, opening diplomatic channels. Others started withdrawing their ships from Council service, claiming they needed to defend their own worlds. The Council's unity, which had held for 10,000 years, began cracking. On the third day, the vote came. The Council chamber was tense. Every representative knew what was at stake. Accept the human terms and admit defeat or refuse and risk extinction. The vote wasn't even close. 47 species voted to accept Earth's terms. Only 13 voted to refuse. The Council, as it had existed for millennia, was finished. Zexathar was the first one arrested. Human Marines, assisted by representatives from species that had been oppressed by Arxian dominance, took him into custody. He struggled and raged, but it made no difference. He and 46 other council leaders who had ordered the Valoran attack were transported to a neutral station for trial. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Evidence was presented. Survivors testified. The prosecution showed footage of the bombardment, including Telmara's final message. The defendants claimed they were just enforcing council law. They claimed they had no choice. The judges didn't agree. Zexthar and 38 others were found guilty of genocide. They received life sentences in prison. 9 were acquitted on various technicalities. But the message was sent. Leaders who ordered the murder of civilians would face justice. Admiral Kane attended the trial's conclusion. He sat in the observation gallery and watched as Zexthar was led away in restraints. The Arxian looked at him with pure hatred. "You've destroyed the galaxy's peace," Zexthar hissed. The council maintained order. "Now there will be chaos. Younger species will fight for dominance. Blood will be spilled." Kane stood up and walked to the railing. He looked down at the former High Arbiter. Maybe there will be chaos for a while. But it will be honest chaos. Species fighting for themselves, not for the Council's version of order. And eventually they'll learn to work together, because that's what intelligent beings do. They learn. They adapt. They become better. He turned to leave, then paused. The Council's order was built on fear and oppression. You kept the peace by threatening to destroy anyone who challenged you. 3 weeks after the Battle of Valora Prime, Earth looked different. The orbital shipyards that had been running emergency war production now switched to a new task. Instead of pure military vessels, they were building something else. Hybrid ships designed by both human and Valoran engineers. Kiranel stood in the observation deck of one of these shipyards, watching the construction. Beside her, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood quietly. They had become friends in the aftermath of the war. Kiranel was one of only 48,000 surviving Valorans. Sarah was the human who had witnessed her species' destruction. "I still can't believe you did it," Kiranel said softly. "You were outnumbered so badly. Everyone said you would lose." "We almost did," Sarah admitted. "If the Council had known about our new weapons, if they'd been prepared, it would have been different. We got lucky." "It wasn't luck," Kiranel said. "It was courage. And loyalty. Telmara used to say that humanity's defining trait wasn't violence or ambition. She said it was your capacity to form bonds with people who weren't your own species. She said that would either save you or destroy you." Sarah smiled sadly. I wish she could see what her sacrifice led to. Below them, workers finished installing crystalline computing cores into a new ship's systems. These cores were Valoran technology, combined with human weapons and engines. The result was something neither species could have built alone. The reformation of the Galactic Council was messy and chaotic. Without the Arxian Empire's dominance, dozens of species began asserting themselves. Old grievances resurfaced. Territorial disputes erupted. For a few weeks, it looked like the galaxy might descend into complete chaos. Then something unexpected happened. A species called the Thalen, who had been quietly oppressed by the Council for centuries, reached out to Earth. They proposed a new alliance based on mutual protection and equal partnership. Within days, 10 other species joined. Then 20, then 50. They called it the Galactic Federation. It was built on the principles Sarah had outlined: equal representation, democratic decision-making, and a commitment to protect weaker species from aggression. Not everyone joined. The Arxian Empire refused, insisting the old council system was superior. A few other species followed them. But the majority of galactic civilization embraced the new order. Earth didn't seek to lead the Federation. Admiral Kane made that clear in his first address to the Assembly. "We didn't fight the Council to replace them," Kane said. "We fought them to prove that might doesn't make right. We're happy to be one voice among many. We're happy to cooperate as equals. But make no mistake, if this Federation becomes what the Council was, if it starts oppressing the weak and ignoring justice, we'll fight against it too. Humanity won't be the galaxy's police force, but we will be its conscience." The speech was well received. Many species had feared that Earth would try to dominate after their military victory. Kane's words reassured them. But Kane did make one non-negotiable demand. The Federation would create a special military branch called the Memorial Fleet. Its sole purpose was to protect species too small or weak to defend themselves. The fleet would be composed of ships from multiple species, commanded by officers from those same species, and funded by the Federation as a whole. The first vessels in the Memorial Fleet were named after Valorans who had died in the massacre. The flagship was called the Telmara, in honor of the first ambassador who had spoken for humanity. Kira Nell was offered command of the Telmara. She accepted. "I'm not a soldier," she told Kane when he visited her on the ship. "My people were pacifists. We didn't believe in violence, and I know," Kane replied. "But you believe in protecting others. You believe in preventing what happened to your species from happening to anyone else. That's what the Memorial Fleet is for. Not conquest. Not domination. Protection." Kira Nell walked through her new ship, human weapon systems integrated with Valoran navigation and communication technology. The crew was mixed. Humans, Valorans, Thelan, Morvians, and others. Species that had once fought each other under council orders now worked together. On Earth itself, changes were happening. A monument was being constructed in Geneva, next to the United Nations headquarters. It was made from crystal salvaged from Valora Prime's ruins. The crystal had been shattered by the bombardment, but Valoran refugees had carefully gathered pieces and brought them to Earth. Human artisans and Valoran craftspeople worked together to reshape the fragments. They couldn't restore the original crystals, but they could create something new, something that honored the past while looking toward the future. The monument was called the Crystal Garden, named after the place where Sarah and Telmara had first become friends. At its center was a statue made from the largest crystal fragment, a human and a Valoran standing together, looking up at the stars. The inscription read, "In memory of Valora Prime. They stood with us, so we stood for them." The dedication ceremony drew representatives from across the galaxy. Even some former council species sent delegates, quietly acknowledging that the old order had been wrong. Kira Nell spoke at the ceremony. She stood before the crowd, her crystalline body catching the sunlight, and shared Telmara's final message. Many in the audience wept. "My people are almost gone," Kira Nell said. 4,300,000,000 Valorans died because they believed in doing what was right instead of what was safe. But their sacrifice wasn't in vain. It showed the galaxy what the Council really was. And it showed what humanity really is. She paused. The Council said humans were violent and unpredictable. They said you had no place in civilized space. They were wrong. Humans are capable of violence, yes, but you're also capable of loyalty, justice, and self-sacrifice. You're capable of putting principle above survival. That's not a weakness. That's strength. After the ceremony, Sarah and Kira Nell planted a crystal tree from Valora Prime in the garden. It was a sapling, barely a meter tall, grown from seeds that had survived the bombardment. Valoran crystal trees took centuries to mature, but once they did, they could live for thousands of years. "It will outlive both of us," Kira Nell said, patting the soil around the tree. "Maybe it will outlive the Federation itself. And everyone who sees it will remember what happened here. They'll remember that the Valoran stood for humanity when nobody else would, and they'll remember that humanity didn't let that stand go unanswered." Sarah looked at the young tree. "What if it doesn't survive? What if the climate is wrong, or the soil can't support it? Then we'll plant another one," Kira Nell said simply. "And another. And another. Until one of them takes root. That's what hope is, Sarah. Trying again even when you're not sure it will work." The galaxy slowly adjusted to its new reality. The Galactic Federation faced challenges. Species that had been enemies for centuries had to learn to cooperate. Resources had to be redistributed fairly. Old injustices had to be addressed, but it worked. Slowly, messily, with setbacks and arguments, it worked. The Memorial Fleet grew. Within a year, it had 200 ships from 40 different species. They responded to distress calls, protected trade routes, and intervened in conflicts before they could escalate to genocide. Admiral Kane retired from active military service but stayed on as an advisor. He watched with pride as younger officers took command of human fleets. Officers who had grown up watching the Battle of Valora Prime. Officers who understood that military power was meant to protect, not dominate. 5 years after the war, Kane visited the Crystal Garden one last time. He was older now, his hair gray, his movements slower, but his eyes were still sharp as he looked at the crystal tree. It had grown significantly, reaching 3 meters tall. Its branches caught the light and scattered rainbows across the garden. "I wanted to ask you something," a voice said behind him. Kane turned to see a young Valoran, barely an adult. "Were you scared? When you went to fight the council? Everyone says you were brave, but I wanted to know if you were scared." Kane smiled. "Terrified. I knew the odds. I knew most of us would probably die. Every human in that fleet was scared. Then why did you go?" "Because being scared doesn't mean you do nothing," Kane replied. "It means you do what needs to be done anyway. The council was wrong. They murdered your people. If we let that stand, if we did nothing because we were afraid, then what kind of species would we be?" The young Valoran thought about that. Telmara used to say something similar. She said, "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing despite fear." "She was a wise woman," Kane said. "I wish I could have known her better." "She would have liked you," the young Valoran said. "She always believed the best in people, even when they didn't believe in themselves." Kane left the garden and took a transport up to the orbital station. From there he could see Earth below, the blue-green world that had taken a stand against an empire. Around it, ships moved in orderly patterns, human vessels and alien vessels working together. His communicator chimed. It was Kiranel calling from the Telmara. "Admiral, we've received a distress call from the Utari system. A warlord is attacking civilian transports. The Memorial Fleet is responding." "How many ships do you have in range?" Kane asked. 7. The warlord has 20. Kane felt a familiar tension. The odds were bad, but not impossible. Not for the Memorial Fleet. "Be careful, Kiranel.